One of the very first videos I made was on the Fujifilm x100v and the accessories I use with it, or were thinking about kind of using with it. And then I kind of realized that that's a pretty outdated video. I made that maybe a year and a half ago back in 2020, and I don't use some of the stuff that I talked about in that video, and I've kind of changed and simplified my setup. So I want to give an updated video on my Fujifilm x100v accessories that I use pretty much in the entire later half of 2021 and what I'm using right now and into the rest of 2022. So let's go ahead and get started. When it comes to the x100v, I like to keep things simple because it is my everyday shooter, my travel camera as well. I don't like to overcomplicate things with the x100v. So as you can see, I'll have very little to talk about in this video. The first accessory I want to talk about is the Artisan Obscura shutter release that I've been using. I talked about this in the last video, and yes, I still use it. It was a bit of a pricey piece of equipment, but it has served me well throughout this entire year and a half. So I think I can say I got my money's worth. It cost me about 40 bucks. So if I would go back and buy another one, I probably would not. I think I was kind of feeling like I really wanted it back then, so it was kind of more of an impulse buy, which is why I kind of spent so much. But to be honest, if this shutter release was worth like 20 bucks or something like that, then it would be a much better deal. It is a very good shutter release. I like the way it feels, I like the way it looks, but I don't necessarily think you should be spending that much on a piece of wood anyways. So I picked up a small pack of like plastic red shutter release buttons that I got from Amazon, and I use that with my X-T4, my X Pro 1, and my film cameras and whatnot, and those serve me pretty well, and I think functionality and aesthetically wise, they do the job. So if I would have to go back and buy another one of these, I probably wouldn't, but I do think I really do like the shutter release regardless. So it never really falls off, it doesn't come loose, so I don't really have to worry too much about losing it so much. I know that might happen in the future or whatever, you don't know what happens with your shutter releases, but I've got my money's worth out of it so far. So that's kind of an update on the shutter release if you guys were curious. Let's go ahead and move on to camera strap, because this is probably the most asked question I get about on this channel. Everyone always asks me what camera strap I'm using because I always showcase it in the videos and it looks really nice, etc, etc. I've answered a lot of the comments, but if you haven't seen any of that, I'll show you guys right now. This is the Moments leather camera strap, and I think the color is in natural. And this is a really nice camera strap. It's one of my favorite camera straps. I use it all the time on the V, and sometimes I'll alternate with the X-T4, particularly because I like the way it looks. It's a really nice color, but it's also this kind of flexible leather material. So it's a very light camera strap, which is a good thing because I like to bend it and stuff it into bags and stuff like that, so I don't want it getting in my way. But it's a very solid quality, so it doesn't feel like it's cheap or it's gonna rip or it's gonna break on me or anything like that. And it just, overall, it looks really nice. So that's the camera strap I'm using. I'll probably have it for a very long time and maybe pick up another one if this does eventually rip, but it's a very nice camera strap. I'd recommend it. You guys know with the last camera strap I talked about, I was using the Hyperion camera strap, and I think I attached it wrong. I kind of double ringed it, so it was giving me some scratches on the outside of my X100V. I don't use that camera strap so much on the V. I use it more on the X Pro 1 because I figured different camera shapes, camera bodies allow the camera strap to be in a better position. So that's kind of where I use that camera strap now. And I pretty much stick to the Moments leather camera strap when I'm using the V. Another camera strap I want to talk about is the actual wrist strap. It's the same one as the leather camera strap, just the wrist strap version. I think it was like 10 bucks or something like that when I bought it. And this is nice as well. Quality wise, I don't think it's as nice as the full on camera strap, but it's supposed to be the same. So I got the black one for this one, and this is what I'll use when I don't want to carry the camera around my neck. Maybe I have a bag or something like that, so I'll have the V inside the messenger bag, which I'll talk about later in a future video, because that's been my go-to everyday bag, and I kind of modified it and whatnot. But I'll have the X100V in there, and then I'll have the wrist strap just in case, and it's just so easy to pull out. The wrist strap I don't use too often. I only use it when I have the camera in hand and I don't ever want to kind of let go of it, like I'm out for a portrait session or a photo shoot or something like that, and then that's the scenario I would use it in when I would put it in a bag or whatnot. So that's also a nice camera strap that I like using if you guys were curious. Next up, I want to talk a little bit about filters because my filter setup has changed a bit since the last video. The filter I use the most often would probably be the UV filter. I don't know if that really counts, but as you guys know, the V can be weather sealed when you put on the adapter and the UV filter, so that hasn't changed from my last setup. I pretty much keep that married to the camera. I know a lot of people have issues with UV filters because they think it might degrade the quality of your image. I haven't noticed any such thing when it comes to shooting with the V. For the most part, I think most of my images are sharp and I like the way it looks, so I haven't had problems with that. And I think it's worth having a UV filter on for a little bit of protection, and it also weather seals the camera, so that's nice too. So I find myself in scenarios, in travel scenarios and everyday scenarios where sometimes I might get spills, things you just can't avoid, and I like having that little bit of security when it comes to the weather sealing for the V. Might as well take advantage of it, you know? My only concern would be that it does protrude the camera out a little bit, but to be honest, it's still a pancake lens. It's still very small, so it's relatively negligible for me. But if you want the most portable setup, then you could probably do without the filter and the adapter, you know. Another filter I use very often is the Moments Cinebloom filter. You guys have probably seen the video I made on that about last year or so. For a while when I got this filter, I wasn't using it so much because I wasn't entirely used to the look. It has a particular way of rendering light and halation and whatnot, and I wasn't entirely on set with that kind of softer look. But later I've gotten more accustomed to the Cinebloom filter look, and I've been using it pretty often. So for the later half of 2021, that was pretty much married to my camera because I didn't want to take it off and whatnot, and it was just nice. It was a good aesthetic to it. Recently, however, I stopped using the Cinebloom filter. I've kind of noticed that there is a difference in image quality. I have the 10%, by the way. Sometimes I'll like the aesthetic, and then sometimes I'll go back and I'll look at my older x100v pictures, and it'll have this kind of sharpness and clarity to it that you kind of don't get when you're using the Cinebloom filter. So I started to miss that a little bit, so now I am a little bit more selective when I use the Cinebloom filter. Right now, recently, for the past few months, I haven't been using it so much, but occasionally, if I feel like throwing the Cinebloom filter on, then I have no problems with using it. I toss that on. But that's pretty much my most used filter besides the UV filter, since the UV filter doesn't really count like that. In terms of filter usage, I haven't had much change in autofocus problems. I know sometimes if you stack on too many filters, your camera has to look through multiple things, so the autofocus can deteriorate, but the X100V, I haven't noticed any problems if you were concerned about stuff like that. Even having two filters on, it's okay, and the image quality is sufficient enough for what I do, and I don't think I've really noticed any changes in that. As for future filters, I've been debating on getting more 49mm filters, particularly like starburst filters or cineflare filters. They look really fun to use, and I want to go on sessions with them and just have a little kind of 49mm kit in my bag to alternate with when I'm using the X100V, but I haven't found particularly a good one that I'm interested in yet that fits the X100V, because a lot of times manufacturers, they don't build a lot of 49mm stuff. It's a very small filter size, so people kind of build around that later, which is kind of cool. That Moment had the Cinebloom filter available for 49mm, but I'm still waiting on their new filters to get 49mm variants as well. But that's stuff I'm looking into for the future. I think it'll be fun to add kind of those effects on when I'm taking photos later. Next up, I want to talk about accessories that I realized that I didn't need after shooting with for a significant period of time with the V. I think accessories for your cameras are very personal, in particular to how you like shooting, how you like handling the camera, and what you like to do with the camera. And so these things kind of you figure out on your own later as you start to shoot more with the camera. So one of the things I forgot to mention that I don't really use anymore would be the KNF Concept, the variable ND filter that I used to use when I was shooting video with this camera. And obviously this camera has a built-in ND filter for both photo and video now after that firmware update. So I have no longer any use for that ND filter, which is a great thing because it's just one less screw-on filter to worry about. Something else I was thinking about buying but never really got around to buying because I realized I didn't need was actually a lens hood. Now I like lens hoods, I like the way they look, I like the aesthetic of it, especially the square ones, and I was tempted to buy one for a pretty long time, but I've noticed this camera doesn't flare that much significantly enough for me to get a lens hood. Even when I'm shooting directly into sunlight, I noticed compared to some other lenses that I've been using, this camera's lens is quite minimal when it comes to lens flares. So I never really felt the need to buy a lens hood. I was always interested, but it would increase the size of my camera for something I really didn't need, so I just kind of decided to abstain from it. I was in a similar decision range when it came to the hand grip for this camera as well. I've thought about getting a thumb grip, hand grip, but I've never really felt like I needed it. When I went out and shot, I've always taken pictures just fine. Even though the x100v has a little bit of a shallow grip, I don't mind it too much, and I've been taking photos just fine. So I know some people, maybe it's just my hands are small or something like that, but some people prefer to get a grip or a thumb grip or something like that, and it helps their shooting experience. Me, personally, I haven't felt the need for it, so I've never gotten around to buying that stuff. Also want to talk a little bit about a small mini tripod I've been using. Usually I would keep this one at home to kind of just have something on my desk or something like that, but I brought it out recently to a kind of a camping trip with the x100v that I'll talk about maybe in a few weeks or so whenever I get to editing all those photos. But it's actually really convenient to have a small mini tripod with this camera. I realized when I was shooting motion blur and stuff like that, how convenient it could be to have inside your bag and whatnot. And then all it takes is just a small screw on, and then you can set up your camera anywhere. So the one I'm using right here is the Manfrotto mini tripod. I bought this one a few years back and it's been serving me pretty well. So that's something that I use as well. So anyways, that pretty much wraps up this video. When it comes to your personal setup, and if you're thinking about accessories you want and whatnot, especially if you just got the V for a camera, it can be kind of compelling to just go and buy everything you could possibly put onto this camera. And I wouldn't recommend that personally, because I think shooting experiences and handling a camera is a very personal thing. So like I said, some people might prefer to shoot with the hand grip or hood or whatnot, and personally I wouldn't do certain things like that. And so it's something you figure out as you take the camera out and you shoot more often. So what I would recommend if you're on the fence about buying a certain accessory or something for your camera would be to go out and shoot and pay attention to if you feel like, oh, that would have been much easier if I had this grip, or oh, that would have been better if I had the lens hood on, or something like that. And if you find yourself in situations like that pretty often, then you might as well go ahead and buy the accessory, because then it's something you actually need rather than something you feel like you might want. Does that make sense? So that's just any sort of mini advice that I could offer if you're on the fence about buying something for your camera. But otherwise, if you like this video, please like the video down below. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't yet for more photography stuff. And I'll see you guys, as always, in another video. Thanks for watching. Peace.